The story begins with a line, "Why did you betray me?" The scene shows a group of people and a man saying, "Kid, you've been hiding for so long, but I've finally found your home." There's no civilized society in this post-apocalyptic world. In this chaotic world, it's survival of the fittest. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. Another character, who looks like Toga from My Hero Academia, says, "Well, I'm a weak woman and can only rely on the strongest, so I'm sorry." Then, a man grabs a metal bar, and the protagonist asks, "What are you going to do to me?" In the next scene, we only see blood splattering across the screen. The scene shifts to a statue buried in ice, with the words, "Ice Age, 28 weeks earlier." Human nature is also frozen in this world. We see that the world is completely frozen over. A man appears walking on the snow, and in an alley filled with snow and water, our protagonist emerges. He says, "Looks like this place hasn't been explored yet. Food and fuel, once easy to get, have become extremely precious." As he walks, he observes, "The ice here is thin enough. It should be safe." Suddenly, everything starts shaking. The protagonist says, "It was an earthquake." This frozen world is like God's way of telling us that human civilization is as fragile as ice, vulnerable to even the slightest breath. The ice gives way, a crater forms, and the protagonist falls into it. Desperate, he uses his pickaxe to hold onto the ice wall, praying, "For the love of God, don't break." Even though he manages to hold on, he continues to descend rapidly. Unfortunately, he falls, but luckily, he lands on soft snow. He comments, "Good thing there was snow down here. If it were ice, I'd be toast." The protagonist reflects. As the saying goes, escaping a major disaster is even more alarming in this frozen world. Suddenly, a horrifying creature appears in front of him, known as the White Skin, a human devourer. The protagonist says, "Am I lucky? My luck is worthless." He starts running desperately, and the noise they make causes an ice pillar to fall on the monster's head, killing it. The protagonist comments, "Because of all that noise, the stalactites fell, saving my life." Looking up, he sees part of the structure collapsing. The snow begins to cover his body, and he says, "I'm not going to be buried alive here." Completely covered in snow, only his arm sticks out. A spectral creature, resembling a slug, approaches his arm. Suddenly, the protagonist's eye glows, and he wonders, "What's happening? Why am I daydreaming at a critical moment like this?" The protagonist realizes the creature has entered his body, but decides to let it go. He says, "Forget it. I've been out long enough. I should head back home. At least today I won't return empty-handed." As he sees a chocolate bar in the snow, the scene shifts, and the protagonist stands in front of a massive building. He opens a manhole cover and comments, "Since most of the city is frozen, the only way home is through this passage. I have to do this day after day. I don't know how long this life will last." Compared to the outside, the situation inside the building is also dire. As he descends through the passage, he reaches a camp. When the disaster struck, many people were trapped in these buildings, and now, with scarce supplies, it's hard to imagine how they will survive. The protagonist arrives in front of a door marked with the numbers 09. The woman who apparently betrayed him at the beginning of the story opens the door and hugs him. He comments, "You opened the door so quickly. Don't tell me you didn't lock it." She responds, "I just wanted to see you as soon as possible. Don't you want to see me too?" He replies, embarrassed, "Yes, I do. But you also need to lock the door carefully." She says, "Is locking the door more important than seeing me?" The protagonist then shows her the chocolate. "Look what I brought for you." Surprised, she asks, "What is this?" He responds, "It's chocolate." Happy, she gives him a kiss on the cheek and says, "Honey, you are the best." She then comments, "You only brought one chocolate." The protagonist replies, "Just one, and I almost got killed by monsters for it, so hurry up." With a serious face, she says, "Wow, you're really pushing it, huh?" Facing the fireplace, the protagonist is a bit depressed, saying, "Well, what should I do now? It's been days since I found any decent food in this world, and we'll probably have to eat the seeds I collected tonight." The situation with the seeds we planted before is not very optimistic, and if we eat these seeds, there will be no hope left. If we keep going like this, we'll all go crazy. If the flesh of these monsters wasn't so poisonous, people in the building wouldn't have to endure hunger. The protagonist then drops a piece of meat into the fire, which turns blue. He comments, "Well, looking on the bright side, at least the fat from these monsters makes good fuel. And in this frozen world, at least we won't freeze to death. Wait, is today Valentine's Day? I really forgot about that." He then says, "Xiaming, I'm sorry, but I forgot that today was." Xiaming, where did Xiaming go? The protagonist hears noises coming from behind the door and thinks, "Well, that's Xiaming's signal, but why did she go outside? What is Xiaming doing out there?" As he opens the door, the protagonist gets whacked in the face with a baseball bat, being thrown back. A man says, "Merry Christmas, brother. Is this a surprise for you or something unexpected?" We see Xiaming embracing the man, just like at the beginning of the story. The protagonist, confused and betrayed, asks Xiaming, "Why did you betray me? Why did you follow Luo Delong?" She completely changes her personality and responds, responds, "How dare you ask me that? Do you really think you can win me over with a piece of chocolate? Do you think I don't know you've been hiding food all this time?" When the protagonist tries to speak, she interrupts, "With such a big bag, you only brought air. You even lied to your girlfriend. You're no longer human." The man then crouches in front of the protagonist and says, "Brother, as a fellow companion, I really feel bad for you. So, let me give you a warning. There's no civilized society in a post-apocalyptic world. It's the law of the jungle. Do you understand? You can't even support your own woman. What woman would be begging to follow you? Weaklings have two choices: rely on the strong or be preyed upon by the weak." The protagonist responds, "Where do I have any food?" The man, already preparing to hit him again, says, "Looks like you refuse to rely on the strong, so you can only be preyed upon by the weak." The protagonist says, "Okay, calm down. What are you going to do?" He then breaks the protagonist's leg with a blow and knocks out a tooth with another blow to the head, breaking his arm too. Everyone starts beating the protagonist, leaving him completely battered and disfigured on the ground. Another man comments, "Boss, we searched the whole house and only found rotten corn." The blonde man replies, "Weaklings are also meat, aren't they? So, we don't choose food. Give me my knife now." The man was ready to chop up the protagonist, and he thinks, "It happened after all, the end I least wanted in my life. If there is another life, I want to live and survive all of this." Suddenly, the protagonist wakes up in the middle of an office, desperate and scared, calling out for Luo Delong. He wonders, "Wait, what just happened here? Didn't I just die? Why am I completely unscathed in this place?" The protagonist has been taken back to 28 hours before the Ice Age. It said, protests in Queens are still ongoing. The city's police department has been dispatched on a large scale to maintain order. The elites of Manhattan are enjoying an exclusive party. The gangs of Brooklyn are conducting transactions in the dirtiest streets of the world. The whole city is unaware of what's about to happen, except for one person. The protagonist walks confusedly down the street and, looking up at the sky, sees all the people gazing at the northern lights and taking pictures. He comments, "The aurora. That's the signal of the Ice Age." He can only remember Xiaming's words, "I am a weak woman and can only rely on the strongest." He thinks, "I was really blinded by her appearance for her to do such a thing to me. But now it's time to end all of this." He answers Xiaming's call, and she says, "Honey, are you still working overtime? Did you see the aurora? It's so beautiful." The protagonist, furious, responds, "We're breaking up, and don't ever call me again." Xiaming, surprised, asks, What's wrong with you? Why suddenly?" He hangs up on her and deletes her contact, saying, "Since I have a second chance at life, women like you who hurt me will freeze to death in the coming Ice Age." Back in the Brooklyn district, the protagonist reflects, "With a second chance, this time I need to prepare well. In my past life, or rather, in my past cycle, within 24 hours before the Ice Age, the temperature will gradually drop to freezing. From now on, I have less than 28 hours before the world freezes. It seems like a lot of time, but as the temperature drops, people will understand the problem. Society, already unstable, will become even more chaotic. So, the time I have to gather supplies is exactly 1 hour." The protagonist is incredulous. "Only 1 hour left." He says, "Besides common supplies, in the initial chaotic environment, we also need something to protect ourselves, like weapons." The scene changes, and our protagonist is in the middle of the street late at night when a police car stops behind him. One officer comments, "This guy looks really suspicious, walking around so late." The other responds, "Then follow him. I'll show you some tricks." Suddenly, the older officer says, "Hey, you, stop. Don't move until I say so." The two officers point their guns at the protagonist, saying, "Hands up now." The blonde officer, shocked, says, "Suspect of robbery found on 4th Avenue." The protagonist thinks, "Damn, this neighborhood has been hectic lately. They mistook me for a robber." The older officer asks, "What do you have in your hands?" The protagonist replies, "Well, sir, I just have a cell phone." He thinks, "I don't have time to waste with these two officers. Hopefully, they'll let me go after an inspection." The other officer warns, "Rookie, remember, don't approach anyone recklessly." Got it. The young officer asks, "What's in your bag? Take it out now." The protagonist takes off his backpack and says, "Well, I'm just a worker." When he's about to open the backpack, the other officer, thinking it was a weapon, recklessly charges at the protagonist. The protagonist thinks, "A second chance. I had a second chance at life and it's going to end like this. No, I want to live. This can't end this way." His eyes start to glow and blue veins appear on his face. From the officer's perspective, the protagonist is enveloped in a blue aura. They wonder, what's happening? The bullets, I can see them clearly. Is time slowing down? I can dodge this. It seems like it's not just an illusion. Calmly, the protagonist dodges the shot. He thinks, "Idiot, I'm a taxpayer too, and you have the nerve to shoot at me. I don't have time to waste on a stupid person like you." The protagonist moves quickly towards the officer and delivers a powerful punch, breaking his jaw. In another frame, we see the officer's teeth flying and his eye almost popping out of its socket. The other officer, in shock, sees his partner being thrown forcefully against the wall, looking like a completely deformed ragdoll. The older officer falls to the ground, desperate, asking, "What are you? How did you do that? Who are you?" The protagonist, with a very imposing design, confidently replies. The officer says, "Official command issued. The suspect has escaped. Officer's weapon lost. I repeat, suspect escaped. Officer's weapon lost." He concludes, "Today was truly unbelievable." The protagonist runs at high speed and reaches his apartment. Sitting on the floor, he can't understand what happened, wondering, was that real? How could I do such a thing? Should I try again? He pulls out his gun and shoots at the mirror. Moving at high speed, he activates his power again and catches the bullet before it hits the mirror. He says, "I caught it. I really caught it. As I thought, I gained superpowers. There's no sign of an ice seal, so why is there ice all over my body? It could be high-speed movement, like a supersonic plane. It seems this superpower is related to speed. Even though it's a special ability, I predicted the day of the apocalypse. This ability might allow me to stay one step ahead." Suddenly, someone knocks on the protagonist's door. He says, "Who's visiting so late?" Opening the door, he finds the building manager. She asks, "Was that the sound of gunshots?" The protagonist responds, "It was the TV. The remote is kind of broken. Sorry about that." The gun was on the table, but the manager doesn't see it. He adds, "The nearby convenience store was robbed. Security isn't great, but everything's fine, right?" The manager replies, "Thanks for the heads up. Mrs. Feng, you're very kind." She says, "You young people need to take care of your health. Don't work too many extra hours." He closes the door and thinks, "All right, now back to the issue at hand. How am I going to solve the problem of supplies? Wait, she mentioned that the nearby store has everything." The protagonist smiles mischievously and says, "Time to stock up." He arrives at the convenience store, observing the items while the camera films him. In a fraction of a second, he disappears. The sleepy clerk doesn't even notice. She only sees the receipt machine printing endlessly and wonders, what happened? Someone bought something, but I didn't see anyone. She finds a note that says, "Sorry, don't be scared. Go home and stay safe." She thinks, what a weird message. First a robbery, now this. Suddenly, two armed men enter, pointing a gun at the clerk. She thinks, I'm really unlucky these days. It's another robbery. The men call her a bitch and demand the money quickly. Across the street, a horrifying creature with white legs and multiple mouths appears. The robber asks, "Why is it getting so cold all of a sudden?" The henchman says, "Look at the door." A creature covered in eyes and mouths enters the store. The robber says, "What the hell is that?" The henchman starts shooting, but the creature doesn't die. The monster grabs one of the robbers by his green hair and rips the skin off his face. The monster says, "This tastes awful." The girl, terrified, tries to take a picture of the creature devouring the man. The police watch everything, and one of them comments, "Is this a live stream that young people like?" The other replies, "It's been popular lately. What you're watching is a short video. What's happening is the end of the show." The officer says, "Doesn't this look like an emergency government message?" The other responds, "Seems like something happened." A message says, "This is the Department of Security and Logistics for the Homeless." The protagonist says, "It's starting. The city is experiencing a cold wave for inexplicable reasons. Citizens, close your doors and windows, stay warm, and do not leave your homes." Finally, the Ice Age apocalypse is beginning. A message says, "The cold wave is coming. The first to suffer is Brooklyn. In 1 hour, we have information about Building 58 in the new district. Common apartment. Citizens, pay attention. This is the Department of Homeland Security and Logistics." A man looking at his computer says, "What would the Department of Homeland Security and Logistics do? It must be really serious." The other replies, "It shouldn't be anything major. The weather has been strange lately." The message continues, "Citizens, please do not panic due to the intense cold wave. Close your doors and windows, stay indoors, and try to stay warm." The protagonist then is determined to build a very secure shelter and says, "This time, there will be no mishaps." The scene shifts to the man who killed our protagonist. He and his henchmen are beating a man on the ground. The man says, "So you won't say anything about it?" The bound and desperate man, with his face all bloody, responds, "I really don't know." The aggressor then shows him a picture of him next to a naked woman and says, "So what's this? How dare you drug the boss's daughter?" The bound man replies, "I really didn't know at the time." The aggressor responds, "Forget it. Someone like you should pray a lot for God's mercy." He then takes a knife and rips out one of the man's nails, finishing by stabbing him to death. The aggressor counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, no mistakes. He was collecting fingers. One of the henchmen asks, "Brother Liu, what will we do with this guy?" Liu responds, "The sin of lust is death by fire. This shabby apartment has a boiler, so throw this pig in it." The henchmen throw the body into the boiler, and one of them comments, "This boiler looks really old. Do you think it will explode if we put the body in?" The other responds, "Stop talking nonsense." Brother Liu is still waiting, but the first henchman notices something wrong. The boiler explodes. The henchman, scared, says, "It's not not that. There was a giant shadow in front of those guys. The scene shifts to our protagonist, who comments, "Phew, a plant structure finally completed. With the current supplies, even if I don't go anywhere, I can hold out for a long time. But it's still not enough. The supplies will run out eventually. And sustainable self-sufficiency is the key. My plan is to make a perfect survival room that is self-sufficient." The freezing phenomenon had been happening for almost an hour, so the protagonist decides to hurry. Suddenly, someone starts knocking on the door, and he thinks, who could be knocking at my door at this hour? Opening the door, he feels a familiar sensation, but this time it's not the bullies, it's the police. One officer says, "Mr. Mo, sorry to bother you." The protagonist thinks, "Security? What's going on here?" He asks, "What's the problem?" "Old Joe?" Joe responds. The broadcast reported that the outside temperature dropped suddenly, but the heating is broken. The protagonist thinks, the heating broke? The officer continues, "People might not notice until tonight, so we came to warn everyone to stay safe." The protagonist remembers, something similar happened last week. The heating malfunctioned and wasn't fixed in time. When I went to fix it, it was a mess. I can't repeat the same mistake again. It needs to be fixed now. He then says, "Can you take me to check it out? Maybe I can fix it." The officer replies, "That would be great," and leads the protagonist to the stairs. "Mr. Mo, where are you going?" The protagonist responds, "I'm heading to the boiler room. Isn't it this way?" The officer says, "The apartment's boiler room is in the basement. We need to go this way." The protagonist thinks, "Wait, I remember the boiler room in the apartment is illegal. Miss Fang mentioned that. Am I developing Alzheimer's earlier than usual?" The scene changes, and everyone arrives at the location. The officer comments, "The basement is really cold." The protagonist thinks, this strange smoke. What is it? It looks like cold air. Looking at the boiler, he says, "This should be fine now." But when he touches the boiler, he realizes something is wrong. Suddenly, behind one of the guards is that huge creature. The guard asks, "Any other problems?" The creature slaps the officer's ear, exploding his head. The creature says, "Fingers." They are growing back as it devours the officer's body. The protagonist thinks, how can it be the white skin? The remaining officer, desperate, wonders what's happening. The creature prepares to attack, but the protagonist activates his power and, in a fraction of a second, manages to save the officer's head. He thinks, that was too close. Old Joe almost lost his head. The door is still open. Perfect. If I run at full speed, maybe I can escape. However, the creature is right on the protagonist's tail. Scared, he says, why can it keep up with my speed? There's no time. The protagonist thinks, maybe it's because I'm carrying Old Joe. That's why my speed isn't fast enough. Well, sorry, Old Joe, but I have to throw you. He throws Joe out and tells him to get out of there. Joe, not understanding anything, sees the creature destroying everything and approaching the protagonist. He thinks, I need to understand this whole situation. First, when I was holding Joe, the white skin could catch up to me. Now, without Joe, my speed is greater. There might be some condition limiting my ability. The creature prepares to attack, but the protagonist easily dodges. The protagonist says, well, what can be confirmed is that this condition has nothing to do with the white skin, so it must be related to Old Joe, right? When I threw Old Joe, a strange phenomenon happened. A similar energy appeared on him when my ability was activated. Could there be a connection between them? Xiaomo then thinks, space-time pebbles. I think I understand. In the past life, humans faced white skin without any chance of survival. That's why when I see a white skin, I instinctively think of running. But changing the subject, the protagonist thinks, but now it's different. If my assumption is correct, even a prey can become a hunter. Xiaomo then picks up a stone from the ground and starts making a throwing motion. Concentrating, he throws the stone at incredible speed, disintegrating the monster. The protagonist says, well, as I thought, my assumption was correct. My ability can only affect targets contaminated by the energy, and as long as they are contaminated by the energy, I can accelerate them. With acceleration, the kinetic energy of objects increases greatly, and even a small stone, accelerated to a certain point, has the power of a railgun. Suddenly, blue liquid starts dripping. When the scene changes, we see it's actually oozing from both the protagonist's eyes and nose. He says, well, this is blue blood. What the hell is happening to my body? The protagonist then collapses to his knees, vomiting this blue blood. As he spits it all out, he lies on the ground saying, man, it's really freaking cold now. Mr. Lin, old Joey. Xiaomo begins to lose consciousness while Joey tries to wake him up. In the background, the protagonist can only hear, Mr. Lin, please wake up. Don't fall asleep. When the protagonist opens his eyes again, he's in a completely different place, with Joey asking, how's the situation outside? A woman responds, the wind is very strong. At this rate, we won't be able to go to the hospital. And it's said that the main gate is frozen, unable to withstand the blizzard. The protagonist can only think, frozen. Joey starts shouting, then let's find something to block the wind first. Otherwise, we'll freeze to death. Go to the security room and turn on the heating now. The woman says, well, it looks like he's poisoned. What happened in the the basement. The voices keep saying, hold on a little longer. Please don't sleep. You saved my life, so I need to thank you properly, my friend. Miss Feng then appears and says, stop talking and go upstairs to find you. Suddenly, a man arrives and says, excuse me. Someone says, we're almost there. Hold on a bit more, Dr. Zhu. A person whose face isn't shown says, just leave him here. Joey asks, Mr. Lin, are you really going to be okay? The person replies, got it. Better go check the stairs. Everything's in chaos. Well, he's still alive, even with such a low body temperature. Are you one of those cryogenic people? Then it said, record 409, male patient, 20 to 25 years old, showing symptoms of suspected poisoning and still in a coma. Vital signs should be considered abnormal. Body temperature is around 10 degrees, but pulse and nerve reflexes do not show abnormality. This is unprecedented to me. Blood separation completed. Let's check the results. The woman, looking at the result, says, interesting. I've never seen anything like this before. The appearance of the blood before centrifuging is no different from normal blood, but after centrifuging, blue impurities were separated from the blood. Analysis of the blood sample will take some time. Continue observing the patient's surface characteristics. If you don't look closely, it can be mistaken for a vein. However, if you look carefully, it's like a type of allergic reaction. Suddenly, the protagonist opens his eyes and the woman says, ah, so you're awake, aren't you? The protagonist, very confused, wonders what is happening to him. She says, I suggest you don't wander around like a headless chicken right now. Xiao Mo, completely naked, asks, who are you? The stylish doctor, smoking a cigarette, replies, me? I'm an unlicensed doctor, and for various reasons, I can't reveal my name, you know? But you can call me Dr. Zhu. Now, let me see how you ended up in such a deplorable state. The protagonist thinks, what does she mean? She then gets close to the protagonist, blows smoke in his face, and says, to be honest, I've never seen symptoms like yours before. Tell me, what happened in that basement? Now I'm very interested in you. Actually, I'm extremely interested in you, kid. The protagonist is lucky, isn't he? Considering she saw the protagonist completely naked in absurd cold, and she's still interested in him. So, the protagonist is quite potent, huh? The temperature shows Brooklyn is at minus 29 degrees Celsius, and the world record for the lowest body temperature is 13.7 degrees Celsius. That's the lowest temperature ever recorded. Although theoretically, the human body can tolerate up to 0 degrees C. When it reaches that temperature, body tissues freeze and cells are destroyed. In fact, temperatures below 32 degrees C can cause joint tremors and death, known as hypothermia. Humans cannot survive in an environment below minus 29 degrees Celsius, and it's even more impossible to survive with a body temperature lower than 13.7 degrees Celsius. Kid, all I know is that I'm learning more from this story than I ever did in school. Man, what's going on here? Just reading this has my brain frying. Dr. Zhu was measuring the protagonist's temperature with a thermometer in his mouth. She then says, all right, you can let go now. Well, take a look at your current temperature. And the protagonist's temperature was 11.5 degrees Celsius. The doctor, impressed, says, well, this is a miracle. You're still alive. Xiao Mo, seeing this, says, 11.5 degrees Celsius. How is that possible? He wonders if it's really because of his ability. Xiao Mo thinks, well, I don't have time to think about that now. I have to complete the plan as quickly as possible. Dr. Zhu was looking at some things and says, all right, understood. As the protagonist tries to stand up, he slips and hits his head on the gurney, and she says, I'm pretty sure I told you not to move, didn't I? Your body is very weak right now. Dr. Zhu then says, well, I discovered something about you. Do you happen to have a superpower? The protagonist thinks, how does she know that? He thinks he doesn't have time to waste with this doctor in this place and starts to smile, saying, what kind of bad joke is this? She replies, don't underestimate a doctor's power of observation. I've been to the second basement. The protagonist thinks, as long as I have this ability active, even if I have to climb all the way up again, it will still be very quick. Again, the protagonist starts coughing up that blue blood. The doctor asks if he's okay, and the protagonist wonders what's really happening to his body. He says he can't accelerate anymore and questions why this is happening right now. According to his past life experiences, what is about to happen is, but just as he was about to speak, a man enters and says, after meeting with Dr. Zhu, you two need to behave a bit more. They were talking behind the door of the room where Dr. Zhu and the protagonist were. Dr. Zhu then gets very angry and tells them to get out. She extends her hand to the protagonist and tells him to get up quickly. The protagonist then wonders what the problem is outside, and she asks him to lie down. The protagonist asks, why am I doing this out of nowhere? She says, no questions, just lie down now. Listen carefully. If you want to survive, do as I say and wait here. Close your eyes and don't move for anything. Do you understand? Dr. Zhu then opens the door, and the crazy guy who killed the protagonist enters. He says, sorry for the intrusion. Dr. Zhu asks what he wants, and he says, says, if it's okay, could I come in to talk for a bit? She responds, well, do what you want. As he enters, she asks what happened, and he says, I heard that the resident of 409 is receiving treatment here, so I have something to ask him. The protagonist, eyes closed, thinks, wait, that voice. I know that voice. She says, well, unfortunately, the person you're looking for died of poisoning. The man smiles and says, well, that's a shame. The protagonist recognizes it as Luo and thinks, well, he wasn't completely frozen before appearing here last week. Last time. Damn, why now? If I could use my acceleration ability now, I could even kill this guy. Luo says, Dr. Zhu, you've been working hard all this time, haven't you? Are you sure this person is really dead? I think I just saw him blink his eyes. How about I help check again? He then says, what do you mean? I'm already saying he's dead. He then pulls out a huge pair of pliers and says, what if it's just a false death? As he is about to stab the protagonist, Dr. Zhu slaps him and says, are you questioning my abilities, Luo? His henchmen get angry, asking how she dares to hit him. But Luo says, wait a minute, sorry. Dr. Zhu, forgive my rudeness. You've saved so many of our brothers on the street. How could I repay you? It was my fault, so please don't be mad at me. But also remember who is taking care of you and your shabby clinic. So, please give me an answer as soon as possible. Just think about it. He turns and leaves while she mutters that it's all nonsense. As they leave, the protagonist gets up and she says, well, they're gone. And I think you have many questions, don't you? The protagonist thinks, exactly. Luo had a reason to kill me last week. But why the hell does he want to kill me now that he saw me? And why does this woman want to protect me? But first, the protagonist asks, well, Dr. Zhu, where are my clothes? She says, wow, is that really your first question? The scene then shifts to show Brooklyn at minus 40 degrees Celsius. Some men were talking. Honestly, when I was younger, I looked at my dad tending the furnace and thought I couldn't be a loser like him for the rest of my life. But now I see my dad was a great man. The other responds, hey, calm down. It's just the messed up weather outside. The temperature will go back to normal. No need to lament over your daddy. Luo then says, do you really think everything will get better in a few days? Government messages used to be broadcast every 20 minutes. Now even the internet has stopped. It's like the government has given up. This repeated cold wave must be God's punishment for humanity. Suddenly, old Joey was tied up in the gears and he says, God doesn't punish sinners like you. Luo replies, well, I'm just managing this apartment. Don't you think the order I've created is harmonious? Joey retorts, in your order, you force everyone to go out and get supplies for you. If they don't, you cut off their heating, right? Luo responds, isn't that good? I provide heating to everyone and they give me something in return. It's a fair order. The principle of equivalent exchange. Joey then starts shouting, calling Luo a parasite. Luo says, what a shame. The tenant of 409 seems to have died. Otherwise, there'd be one more person to enjoy the benefits of the order I bring. Joey, desperate, asks, 409, Mr. Lin died? And he's shocked by the news. Back in Dr. Zhu's room, she says, are you dressed? Well, then let's wrap things up here and you can come back when you're done. The protagonist says, well, you'll have to wait a bit. He thinks, damn, even getting dressed is such a hassle. He asks, well, tell me, what's going on? She responds, do you know how long you were unconscious? The protagonist replies, I don't know. About 6 hours. She, very dryly, says, no, it was 6 days. When he checks the date, he realizes it's already July 21st. He then says, a lot has happened in these 6 days. Now Luo controls the entire heating system of the apartment. He wants residents to exchange supplies for heating, or he cuts off their heat. Many residents were forced to go outside to get supplies, and going outside now is almost like committing suicide. Those who went out probably thought they were going to die anyway. The protagonist then gets furious with the whole situation and thinks, no matter where I am, he really is a beast. He asks Dr. Zhu, is there any way to recover my body? She looks at him and starts smiling. Of course, but if you want me to tell you anything, there's a condition. After all, I run an illegal clinic and don't do charity work. What do you think? Will you accept? The protagonist says, all right, but what's your condition? As long as I can do it, I might accept. She replies, very good indeed. I want you to be my research subject and allow me to study your body. But don't worry, my research won't put your life at risk. And as I said before, I'm very interested in you. The protagonist just smiles and says that it's a deal. She continues, there's a special substance in your blood, but I haven't fully discovered what it is yet. What is certain is that this substance absorbs thermal radiation. It helps convert thermal energy into usable energy for your body. And this phenomenon only occurs when there's a lack of heat. However, before absorbing a certain amount, your body stays in this cold state. To simplify, your body suddenly has a way to store energy, and your current weakness is just hunger. The protagonist then says, so, I just need to eat and I'll be fine. She responds, exactly, but the required amount will be quite large, and I don't have all that food here. The protagonist says, don't worry worry about that. I'll manage. The protagonist starts going down the stairs and thinks, good thing I prepared in advance and went grocery shopping. Now, as long as I get home safely, that would be a win. He opens the door to his room, which was completely frozen, and thinks, damn, those bastards cut off the heating in my room. This could actually freeze me to death. That bastard Luo, my entire room has turned into an igloo. The protagonist walks around the room and says, found the high-calorie food, which were a bunch of chocolate bars. He grabs one and says, bad memories are starting to come back. I really need to switch brands next time I buy chocolate. He starts eating the chocolate bars and says, no reaction. It seems this amount wasn't enough, so I need to up the dose. The protagonist starts eating more and more chocolate and thinks, this feeling, it's like something inside my body is craving heat. This is bad. I feel like I'm about to lose all control of my body. Suddenly, Luo's henchmen open the door to 409 and say, the boss was planning to cut off the big guy's fingers to try to open the door, and out of nowhere, it opens on its own. One of the guys says, yeah, there really are a lot of supplies here. The protagonist no longer has blue veins, but red ones. The guys ask, hey, who the insult here are you? Did you open this door? How did you do it? The scene shifts to Dr. Zhu, and she thinks the final report of the simulation is finally ready. Alright, let's see what exactly is inside your body. The active reversal state affects neural activity. This is really bad. If too much glycogen is replenished, he'll be kinda. Just as she's about to finish speaking, the scene cuts back to the protagonist with those two henchmen. One of the guys says, hey, jerk, it doesn't matter who you are. Everything in this room belongs to us. Got it. The protagonist, now looking very imposing, just smiles at them. He claps his hands together and says, this power is absolutely insane. Guys, if you want part 2 of this story, just comment here part 2 of the ice apocalypse. If there are a lot of comments, and likes, I'll bring it to you as quickly as possible. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support the work, because making these videos is really a lot of work. Thank you so much for watching up to this point. See you in the next video, and thanks.